Truth. Unforbidden. Truth. Podcast.
Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with JT Colfax. JT Colfax is a well-known street artist, former mortuary transporter, and is infamously known for trying to burn down the home of JonBenet Ramsey, as well as stealing a page out of a morgue book, which logged dead bodies of who was who, and this exact page included the information regarding JonBenet Ramsey's body, including when she arrived at the morgue and when her body was transported elsewhere. The house that he infamously tried to burn down just went on the market and is listed for a whopping $7 million. At some point after Colfax's fire, the city council allowed a waiver for a slight change in the address of numbers, but the house remains original to this day. Here's my interview with JT Colfax.
Okay, so I'm JT Colfax. I'm a convicted corpse-abusing arsonist. I'm not up to the level of this channel of like ages and ages in prison or killing people, but I know them. So I did, my biggest stretch in life was 2.7 years in the Boulder County Jail. And it was related to the Ramsey case in a two strange roundabout ways, which we'll get to. In preparation for this, I have like boxes and boxes full of old newspapers about me and what happened with, I started the Ramsey house on fire eventually, but I also stole some papers relating to JonBenet. So I have boxes and boxes full, and I didn't get around to doing a thorough thing. It's not like they're filed, but I found this one in preparation for doing this, and it's just one paragraph from an article. This article is from Westward, of the alternative weekly of Denver, and it has to be from about 1999, and the whole article is about all the Ramsey case sideshows that happened. Other people that got arrested. So many people got arrested in the Ramsey case for weird other shit. And this is a reason I wanted to read this is because in one short bit, it is somebody else, the editor, describing what happened to me. So this is what we're gonna be talking about. So here it is. More material considered suitable for hanging or at least jailing by Boulder authorities was JT Colfax, a driver for local mortuaries who'd already gotten in trouble for taking photographs of corpses. But his big break came when he snatched a page with JonBenet's name on it from the logbook at the Boulder County morgue, and then sent a few burning papers to the mail slot of the Ramsey's Boulder home. After pleading guilty to attempted first-degree arson, Colfax was sentenced to 2 years in the Boulder County Jail. Mind you, I'd already been there 7 months, so that's how it's 2.7 years is what really happened. After pleading guilty to attempted first-degree arson, Colfax was sentenced to 2 years in the Boulder County Jail, an ideal set for an erstwhile performance art. Colfax was recently released from jail. His time served before the grand jury was even close to serving up an indictment. And while a few people have suggested that JT Colfax might have killed JonBenet, he worked harder to solve the case from inside the jail than many have done outside. All right.
And that's a newspaper article that you have from way back when?
Yeah. It's one of millions, but that's more like a mention in an article about all kinds of other people too.
Let's start out with talking about your childhood. Tell me about your childhood, how it was growing up. Were you an average kid, or did you get into any type of trouble or have any issues growing up?
Not really. I went to bed too long, but and I had like shoplifting stuff like that when I was 14. But I mean, like all the really young period, nothing remarkable. I always felt strange. I always loved to go hang out by the railroad tracks and be in empty places. which later in life I started doing urban exploring, like going into abandoned factories. I just love to be in like a 7-story abandoned shoe factory and have it all to myself. It's really fun. But then when I got a little old, 14, 15-ish, I was gay, and my parents hated it, and I smoked weed, and they hated that, so I'd get kicked out, or I would run away, go to Los Angeles, and prostitute and stuff like that. So yeah, it got pretty rough. I did come back. I would go and then come back and all that. I did graduate from high school and everything, but I was already living by myself in an apartment by then.
So you said when you were a juvenile, you were like shoplifting, prostituting, running away. Was there any other type of criminal activity that you were engaging in?
No.
How long did the prostitution last?
All through my 20s. I was everywhere. I'm like, you get your face burned out in San Francisco, you go to LA. And by face burnout, I mean, same thing in LA is like, it starts like, you get there and you're fresh and everyone's picking you up. And then after a while, you've been through like the main core of people that pick up prostitutes, and you start finding that it's getting harder and harder. So you go somewhere else, like San Antonio. And then by the time you get back to LA again, of course, LA was the big thing for me. And it's a big thing for male prostitution, of course. So I would come back there. But, if you left for a couple of months or a year, it all starts newly again. You're a new face to a lot of people.
So how did you go from the sex trade into the mortuary business?
Well, that happened, so it wasn't like I was always stuck every time. It got to be later where, I even went into the Army. And when I came back from that, then I was really stuck on the boulevard for years. But otherwise, it would be like running away and doing it for a while and stuff like that. So then eventually, I'd come back. Then from Denver, from the family, I moved to San Francisco. I had some money, In those days, you could actually plop yourself in a town and get yourself a cheap hotel room that was affordable, for a weekly, like $60 a week or something. And what was the point? I forgot.
How you got into the mortuary business?
Yeah, so I had a job in San Francisco. I got fired from it the first 3 weeks. I just couldn't keep up with the massive. It was a restaurant, but massive. There was a hospital next door, and so there'd be certain times where all the workers rush in, and I could not keep up with all the orders, apparently. And who cares, So I got fired. And then I called a relative who had in-laws who had a mortuary transportation service in Los Angeles. And then I get called back, and I'm told, they said, come down. So I did. And the very first night I got there, it was uncomfortable. They came to be good friends. We all laughed and everything. But the first day, you arrive there, then you live at their house in a room. And there was so it's the owner, his wife, and their a son from the previous wife, 14 or something. And then in another room, there's a couple, and the guy of that couple I would ride with. And then there's me in a room. So, it's very uncomfortable to plop in somebody's house and go, here I am, I live here. Then finally, around 10 at night, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. And I do. And then at 11 o'clock, 1 hour later, comes the knock on the door. And the owner's wife is like, you got a house call. And then I find that the info is taped. I get rushed into my suit and everything, and get a big lump in my throat, oh my God, this is really happening. And then I open the door, and the info is taped to the door, the outside of the door, where you have to go pick this body up at the house, which turned out to be somewhere in East LA. and then to wherever we took it. That kind of stuff is unmemorable to me. Like, and there were so many cases that came after. Like, I can't remember where most cases I can't remember where I took them or something. Always to a client mortuary, generally, sometimes to a coroner's office. But anyway, that very first body, so we drive out to East LA, and it's a Hispanic family, and there's a lot of people in the living room. I mean, it's a huge shit show. Like, this is not what you want from your first one. And my partner's kind of a big weirdo. He literally had love and hate tattooed on his fingers, like the Clash song says. And so the grandpa is dead on the toilet, sitting up, and he had pajamas on, long bottoms, and it hardly even looks like he took them down to shit, but that's only because they're obscured by, he had the pajama tops on and they were open, so they were flopping over that. And, the experienced partner says, okay, you can shake the feet. We got the gurney just outside the door, and everything's very, very cramped. I mean, this thing is hardly a step up from an airplane bathroom. And I just remember the feeling of, and I can still see my hands reaching for those feet. Even though he was Hispanic, he was very dead. He had been sick, and so he was very white. And my hands reaching for those. And my worst fear was that I would touch them and go like, fuck it, I can't do it. And embarrass myself. I mean? Like, run out of the house. Like, I'm not doing it. It's a terrible fear. But it didn't turn out that way for me. I ended up really loving the drama of speeding from one guest place to another and seeing what's going on. So anyway, we got him up on the gurney. I remember a new family member arrived who I couldn't see, but I could hear people talking in the living room because it wasn't that far away. And somebody was, it's like if somebody's probably explaining to a cousin what happened, and he didn't get it. And they went, no, he was in the bathroom making doodles. And that made me almost want to laugh in there while we were trying to struggle him out. Oh, the whole point about his bottoms and everything was that, mind you, this is my first one, so I'm just concentrating on grabbing those feet. But there's a problem. My partner says, wait, there's something wrong. And because he's grabbing the trunk and everything, and it's like something's weird. And it turned out that the pajama tops were obscuring a toilet extender, so he's like 6 inches or so off of where we feel like the toilet is, So there was that delay. I mean, it's like weirdness, like that.
So do you have any interesting stories about transporting bodies?
Yeah, I mean, well, out there in LA, where I first started, we end up all over the LA area. And I remember just little things sometimes, like little things like all over Orange County. Every one of these old people had pictures of Reagan in their houses. And over time, there were other presidents, and I never saw that to that degree before, but they loved Reagan. I know that's not that interesting, but it was weird when you noticed it, But the main, probably weirdest thing, well, the two things are like AIDS was raging, newly raging at that time, and also that we had a client, the client of being UCLA Body Donation Center, which is now closed due to disgraces. But we would go in there, and it's like there's two rooms. One, the front room, like where students did, surgery. They would do surgery on the bodies and stuff like that. And there was a cardboard box full of heads at all times on the floor in there. I mean, heads, totally severed, looking like baloney, at the perfect circle of their neck. And, eyes open and everything like that. But And those would be like waiting in the cardboard box because those would be sent over to USC because they had the big dental school. So that was some kind of paperwork arrangement in the body donation days. And so, I mean, like heads everywhere. So sometimes I would have to pick up a head off, like, there's nothing on the whole table, the only last table, because there's corpses on all of them, but there'd be one with just a head on it. And I would have to pick it up and put it somewhere else so we could dump our body on it. And I would have fear, like, we're going to get in trouble. As in, like, now if I move this head, somebody that runs this place is going to be like, who mixed up the heads? Or, I thought like something like that was going to happen. But then I later learned nobody gives a shit. You lose your name, you lose everything. It's not like, we've got to have John Smith's head with his body. No, his head's cut off and it's going away soon. I just had that fear that I was doing something wrong by moving them, but I had no choice. But anyway, that gives me the experience of having heads in my hands, and I always compare it to like the Dahmer situation, where those cops sued the ones that opened the refrigerator and found the head in there. They sued the city and got like $50,000 each. I'm like, where's my check? God dang it! But and it was freezing in that outer room, but in the next room it was super, super Dracula cold, and it was dark and dingy and metal. And in there, you had it was. I don't think they were frozen, but it was just enough to not keep them frozen so they could operate on. And it was damn cold. And these bodies were hung, and I mean tons of bodies. I'm not talking like 3 or 5 or 10. I don't know, because they went back so far. I don't know, at least 20, maybe 30, and they had these like hooks through their ears, like exactly like when you would think, the old days when ice would get delivered to a place, and they used those big tongs to bring in a giant block. It was like those, mashed right into their ears. And then they had like a dry cleaning bag that, a full length all the way down to their feet, plastic bag, and you could see them because they wanted to see them because they needed, like a certain student needs experience on heart surgery or something, and they would pick the right person, that type of stuff. But on those hooks, you could press a button and they would spin around, like, like you don't like this guy in the front for whatever, legitimate reason. Like they need a woman, they need to do a mastectomy, or, like, so they could spin it around to go like, yeah, that one's perfect, for whatever they want to do that day. But, the button's right there, and I would press it. My partner would sometimes, he'd be like filling out the paperwork out in the other room. And then he would come in there and go like, "Will you stop pressing that goddamn button?" Because I was like a child, like mesmerized. Like, if you had a child like a bunch of helium balloons, I had that same feeling. Like, except for a little, it's not like I'm smiling, and it was just the amazement of like, I cannot believe I can press this button and have corpses just flying past me. It was amazing. And that's, of course, the kind of thing that helped warp my mind for everything that came after. Okay, then also I should mention the AIDS period. You got to remember, this was 1983 or 4. It was definitely in 84, but it might have started in 83. Me doing this, the transporting. So AIDS was raging, just absolutely raging. And when we pick up AIDS cases, they were like wrapped in triple plastic, and we would take them to we could take them to a variety of places, but one that I remember the most was a storage unit in Santa Fe Springs, where it was a regular, ordinary storage unit. Like, there could be people in the slots next door just arguing and go, no, we need to save, like a whole couple going like, we're going to save that. No, get rid of it. Just storage unit shit going on all around you. But they rented a big, it was called the Neptune Society that owned this. They rented a big enough space, of course, so that you could drive a car in there because of what was going to happen. So we could drive a car into our big storage space. But everything else about the lines of storages that anyone can see, you've all seen them. But there are, in every storage space, there's a cellar. There are big ones, big enough to put cars in. So we would drive in there, close the door, and all that was in there. So the rest of it was way too big. So it's just big emptiness and this big freezer in there. And we would throw them in there. And I would always rip the plastic off of their faces. I always feared I'd get in trouble for that, too. Like, they would call the boss and go, who's doing that? But nobody gives a shit. And they also who could tell whether that happened at the hospital or, but from somebody else or whatever, wherever we got him from. But I would always I had to look at him, like, AIDS wasn't what it is today. It was like, it was really scary. I can remember, like, the first runs that I would pick up, the first one I think was in a house call, so he was not in all that plastic. And by the way, this is exactly the era. I was young and fresh in the mortuary business when the era came in, which is now standard, that you wear gloves. That was unthinkable. And it was still bad to do, but you did it with the AIDS cases at that time. And now, of course, it's just common sense. You know what I mean? All these diseased people. But it was like a female worker tradition. I just remember slapping on gloves in this guy, some rich guy's house, and the family's there. And just when you snap them on, you feel like, you're really breaking a taboo. You're like insulting these people. And, but anyway, so I would, on the ones that didn't have much money or something, like county cases or something like that, we would take them and store them out there, and I'd rip open the plastic, even just in the sense of, like, I'd look at him and think, like, would I have slept with this guy? And in every case, I'd be like, no. But
did you ever do anything that you weren't supposed to when it came to the corpses?
Not what you're probably trying to mean. I've been accused of it many times. I mean, it's even a joke. Anybody that works in the mortuary business and didn't do what I do, you're going to end up at a party, and people are going to go, and they find out that you work in the mortuary business. They're going to go, ever see a good one, and all that, And with the, always the guy with the lampshade on the head type person with, nudging you with their elbow. Did you ever, have sex with them is what they mean, and no, never. So that or anything else, except for, of course, but that I took pictures. And, not naked. Well, I guess there was one woman that had her breasts, but you could obviously see that I wasn't trying to take a picture of a beautiful woman. I took her picture because she was an outrageous blob. She was gotta have been pushing 600 pounds. So she was sewed back up on an autopsy table, and the sewing was hideous because they can't get, she wasn't malleable, to like get her skin together and sew it decently, you know what I mean? So you could see all the blobs of fat, like literally you could, if you wanted to, you could reach right in there and pull out like a baseball size piece of fat in many junctures all over her body. One time, that exact woman, that was at Rose Hills, the McDonald's of mortuaries out in Whittier, California. By McDonald's, I mean, like hundreds and hundreds of bodies, 40,000 men and women every day, and a giant cemetery. And they would even advertise on TV, like, bring the kids out, to tour the place. And it's like hot dogs on Saturday. Literally, they would have commercials like that. But there were some young college guys that worked there that would call us, and they really liked it when they would ask for me, and I'd come, like, have coffee with them and sit and talk, and we were about the same age. We all had black senses of humor and stuff like that. Oh, and one time I came in, it was just one of them alone, and he was like, "Thank God you're here. Can you help me?" And that's where I came across the big, giant, fat woman, because he was trying to wash her and prep her, and he ended up pushing her. It was an effort he had to make to get under her back and spray off any blood or whatever's there. He pushed her over, and she fell on the floor. And he you could see he was like all stressed out and sweaty and everything. He'd been trying everything he could think of to get her up. And he's like, "Will you please help me with that?" And I'm like, "Of course."
So there was an incident in a Safeway in which you were arrested. Can you tell me about that?
That was in Denver. So the mortuary business went from LA. Started in LA. Then I also worked in San Antonio. And in San Antonio, I worked at an actual mortuary rather than a transfer service. So everything we talked about just before was a transfer service, which is could go into people's minds exactly as it's a taxi for dead people. That's exactly what it was. Rush to this place, pick up this corpse, and take it to this place. It would be exactly like a cab driver, except for your fare is dead. So then I worked in a mortuary in San Antonio, which is a whole different thing, to be around the mortuary all day and not be going on a bunch of calls and everything. But all kinds of shit happened there too. But then, for what you're saying, then I was in Denver much later. And so many years had passed by. And I had my photos, and people loved to look at them. I showed them around when I was in the Army. A drill sergeant made me put like the worst one, like a box full of heads, on top of the stack, and put them on the floor, and made me do push-ups to put my nose to it. But it was towards the end of basic training when things were getting friendlier. And I was in grade registration in the Army, and everybody around me was going to be too. So that, he was just kidding in a sense, because he was happy to look at them too. And my point in that was, okay, so that the early era of the photos, they all were just like the grossest thing I could find, or the most artsy, empty thing of like an AIDS corpse wrapped in plastic and just in this lonely atmosphere, or those bodies hanging by hooks and all that. So now that after I got out of the business for many years, I lived in New York and stuff like that. I'd done some art projects that made national news several times, like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and all this. So I was getting really successful with that. And then I moved back to Denver. So the reason I bring that up is because that made me used to thinking like of things to further that, So then I'm back in the mortuary business, and I'm like, I'm going to take more pictures, but I'm going to augment them. So I started making things to throw on corpses. Like, so when I get the job, it's weird, but, when they decide to hire you, they hand you the keys, and you've got a vehicle capable of picking up bodies with gurneys in it and body bags and everything. And the whole life you live in is miserable. On call, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You could ask for a day off, but then you won't make any money. And so the point is, I would spend the downtime. I would go out to the van, get a sheet, because of course there's tons of sheets. Because what happens, like you go to a hospital, pick up a dead body, you're with the head nurse or something to check it out. They like oversee you doing it. Most places. A lot of times they leave you alone. But the thing is, the morticians always, you leave a clean pressed sheet, and then you rip the one that they're on and put that like a shroud and pull them over onto your gurney and take it, So you do a sheet exchange. So we'd have extras, and I'd go out and get one. I would start painting crazy shit on it, and then stuff it back in the van, and then you know, in no time, I get the call and I go someplace. And if I was alone, which was mostly, then I would throw it on a body and take a picture of it. So I was making them crazy. And I had like signs like, yeehaw, happy birthday, and a longer one that said, getting fired isn't the end of the world. That was me looking forward to, like, I'm going to get fucked up for what I'm doing here. And all this crazy shit. So at the Safeway, I was still really desperately poor. So I would shoplift shit, and I put the photos to be processed in under the name Jake Rollins, and Rollins spelled with a W, because it just was on my mind because I just picked up a corpse in Rollins, Wyoming. And when I went to go get them a few days later when they were done, I put the packet in my pocket and threw away the outer packet and went and bought something, you know what I mean? Good shoplifter etiquette, buy something. And I knew right when I was in the line, like, oh my God, those two guys are looking at me. And yeah, one of them was a off-duty Denver police, and the other one was just a regular security guard. And they stopped me at the door, and I'm busted. They take me up to the office, and then they call the cops over, like, what is it, like $8 at the most, but that's what they did. And the cops come, they handcuff me and everything. Then they open the photos, and it's nothing but dead body. I wouldn't have taken a picture of anything else. And they start seeing all these dead bodies with all these weird signs. But to me, I always felt like, fuck, it's obvious these are in a mortuary, mortuaries all over town. As in, like, I would understand, like, if they're out in a field somewhere, what it would mean to a cop. But, I'm telling them, like, look, they're all in different mortuaries. I'm working in mortuary business. Got a mortuary van out there in the parking lot and all that. But when they took me out, go down the stairs, they were nearby to where the front door was, and get out into the parking lot. It was filled with cops, cop cars everywhere. And that's what I call cop greed, as in they were making a giant production out of this. And, like, all these idle cops, like, I'm already in handcuffs and everything. I'm a pretty docile person, and it's like, you're not needed, all 50 of you, you know what I mean? But something interesting going on, so they idly pop over. And then when I was being driven to jail, the car that I was in suddenly screeched to a halt, and the cop grabs up my photos and rushes across the street to another cop who just stopped over there and shows them to him like it's his buddy or something. And I knew right then, it's like, oh my God, they literally think that they got a Dahmer on their hands, and they are really happy about it. You know what I mean? Like, cop greed. Like, I'm the one that drove him to the station. You know what I mean? Like, should it have turned out that way? And I feel like that's probably happened at every fucking serial killing and all of that everywhere. Where then they go on TV and it's like, oh, the family, the tragedies, and the condition of the bodies. I feel like the cops really actually went, yay, I'm on a big case. So anyway, I get to the police station. They take me to the homicide squad, naturally. And there's a big, intimidating body outline on the floor, like yellow tape on the carpet, to intimidate all the potential murderers they're interviewing up there. And I keep telling them it's just plain and simple, it's just crazy mortuary photos. And everybody in the mortuary business takes photos. I seriously wonder what goes on now, since everybody has a phone in their pocket, a camera in their pocket. But, they keep wanting more and more, and I stupidly, I want to get away from them thinking that I murdered these people and all that. So I'm like, well, that one's at Bullet Mortuary, that one's at this, and all that. And I really screwed myself because this led to charges in like 8 municipalities. And I finally, they give me, they throw another picture. Where was she taken at? And it was just this big black woman. And she came from we rarely went there, but Pipkin Mortuary, the only, I think, black mortuary in town. And it wasn't anything to do with that, but I just realized, like, why are they so interested? And I thought, and that's where I went, no, I'm not going to tell you anymore, you know? And they probably thought, like, oh, that triggered something. There's something about that. But it was just like, I just realized, like, fuck. Now I've got charges in Englewood, and, Littleton, and Arapahoe County, and Boulder County, and everywhere, you know? So I'm like, already, they're misdemeanors, but they're hopelessly stacking up to the point of 8. And, anyway, so I stopped cooperating in that sense because I realized, like, you just screwed yourself bad. Because if you just went, I work in the mortuary business, those are taking on my meanderings, and if I never identified any of the mortuaries, they would have to really work on it, you know. So just to finish that, the homicide squad part is then Detective Valentine. Of course, I still remember his name all these years later. He tries to do the good cop thing, takes me away from the bad cop, sits me in this open holding cell that's nearby, sits in there with me on the bench, and starts launching into, like, you know, I just wanted to get you out of that room with all those other cops and everything. I know my partner's a dick. That kind of talk, you know, he's smoothing into me. And then he wants, you know, I know, you know, maybe you want to get this off your chest. You know, people do things, you know, they get lonely and all that. And I was like, stop that right there. Because I knew he was trying to march me down into confessing about some sex thing. But there never was. And there was never evidence of it. Because I'm sure they tried. But there wasn't. It was mind-bogglingly weird, the photos themselves. Which, if I'd have gotten away with that, if I hadn't had to steal them, you know, I could be selling those. I have sold some. There were photos that remained in my possession, and I've sold them. Oh, in fact, you know, one person.
So, before we talk about the JonBenet Ramsey case and your link to it, what does the case mean to you, and why have you focused your time and energy on it throughout the years?
I don't. Really. I haven't. There's like books out there that I know my name's in, and I've never even looked at it. Never. And there's like 5 of them at least. I mean, I've certainly seen the big one, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, which has a little section on me filled with mistakes. But, you know, I went on with life real quiet. I've been like a hermit for over 20 years. Until lately, like now, believe it or not, like I help people sometimes go on catches, like stings, to get pedophiles. I've just done 2 in the last week. It was really incredible. But that's because of being in a community where people know about, in modern time, right now, know my past and everything, and some of them find it interesting and funny. And it led me to meet people and get out for the first time in ages. But I'm not sure, did I sideswipe your question? Oh, I just focused on my riveted attention to the case. It was certainly that way in jail. But that's also because the case was raging at the time. And it was marching, inexorably marching towards the Ramseys getting indicted. Which, by the way, now it can be told. I'll tell you a little secret that could be explosive. Well, except for you, probably nobody can prove it. But when you're in jail for 2.5 years in a friendlier type jail like Boulder, you end up, you talk to guards and things like that in a way that wouldn't be proper in other places. And not that I did it that much, you know what I mean? Like, you'd practically, like, in your mind, be holding a stopwatch of, like, I can't be seen talking to Linda Rogers, to a guard, for, this long. Like, it's 10 minutes, like, I got to split from her. But she was friendly to everybody, you know what I mean? But you can't go on and on, And what was my point? God damn it. In the jail. What? Oh, the secret thing is that the janitor, the head maintenance guy, there was once upon a time when the jail was built, it was intended to have electrical outlets in the cells. I don't know if they ever did that or not, but they were blocked when I was there. And the block on mine, it's right under your cold steel table. So you lean back in your chair, and naturally your foot goes on, because it juts out like 2 inches from the wall. So naturally your foot is on there to help you lean back and shit like that. So, but I noticed when I moved into this one cell, I noticed it moved. So of course I get down on my knees like, what the fuck? Because I think like maybe I could have an inch or two of space if I get something like pills or something. But eventually a guard was thorough enough and he found that. And so the maintenance guy, during the lockdown, I have to just stand outside my cell, and the maintenance guy's in there soldering and shit like that. So we're talking, and he told me that they had done a lot of preparation out in the back to, for the media extravaganza that would have happened if the Ramseys been brought in. And nobody seems to know that. It's got to still be out there, some of that work. I mean, think of the electrical hookups that would have to entail. So it was weird to know that, and nobody seems to know that to this day. They really kept that one hidden. But I guess, to sum that up, that it's not so much me, except for I heard it. But it's not so much about me, but as in the actual case. Like, I would hear stuff like that. People, because of what happened, like, I would be going on the radio, I'd be in the newspapers all the time, that people would tell me more, and I would get more and more educated. And so, yeah, I watched the case like a hawk, to the best of it I could there. So stuff like that happened. I mean, I even found the blueprints to the jail, and I ended up being like one of the first inmates online. And, I would write with my little golf pencil, send it to an inmate that had gotten out, and he would post them online, the Colfax diaries, and some of them are still out there online. And I found the blueprints to the jail. So I'm in a little booklet that appeared to be like from the grand opening of the jail, like where they would probably bring the city council and dignitaries in to, have a little party in the empty jail and show it off before they brought inmates in. And in the back of it was an entire fucking blueprint. So I wrote on it, like, where my target areas is, like, I believe Patsy Ramsey would be right here, and that John Ramsey would be in here. So that caused a bit of an internet sensation when that went up.
So in regard to the case, and the infamous incident of stealing the pages out of the morgue logbook, can you talk about that and what, I guess, motivated you to want to not insert yourself into the case, but I guess in a way inserting yourself into the case by taking those because it kind of made you look suspicious at the time?
Yeah, that's a very good topic, because the word insert or inject and all that is kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, I've grown old. I'll be 60 soon, and, people that still want to shame me for any of these activities, it's like that. I don't feel a damn thing. Fuck you. You know what I mean? It's so old. But I always did hate the idea of inserting or injecting. When they use that, it's very pejorative, and because it happened pretty organically. Now, let's see what happened. Okay, first the whole getting busted with those photos. So that happened. That was all over the news. But I'm out again. But I'm struggling. And it's not known what else I've done. But I'm under all this pressure. I got all these cases. I have no money. I'm borrowing from my brother. I can't go on this way. But the part about which part? Oh, the morgue lots. When I went to the Boulder Community Hospital, which contains the morgue, and I was just picking up. Was I picking up? Yes, I was picking up just the most ordinary, dead, dull guy. No murder, no nothing that I can remember. Nothing, I mean, just dead. Because it's not, because that place acts as the Boulder morgue where homicide people would go, it doesn't also mean that, dead guy upstairs that, finally died of cancer doesn't end up there too. It's multi-purpose. So I kind of get this really ordinary, just 50-something dead guy. I got him all strapped in the gurney, got the cover over top of it. I'm with a really nice security guard. We're chatting and everything. Then we go over right by the door, and there's a podium with the logbook in there, which you have to sign. And my name's in there several times. And the worst thing, workplace disaster in the mortuary business is that something just knock comes on the door. And I was like, I winced, shit, because I knew what it would be. And it was the guy there's a town called Lyons, with a Y, in Boulder County. And it was the Lyons Eye Bank. So if you look at us, everybody in that room, now there's three of us, being cards, I'm a deuce. And yeah, I'm a deuce, all right. But the Lions Eye Bank guy, of course, trumps me. So back over to the autopsy table, dump my corpse back onto there, and now, it's late, probably 1:45 in the morning or something. And I've got to wait at least 45 minutes to an hour for this eye surgery on the dead guy. So he removes the eyes, And so I was wandering around the basement of the hospital. I put a magazine. The security guard said, gave us something of or pointed at the wall and said, call this number when you're ready to get him back because he has to sign out the body too. So he goes back upstairs and does his shit. And I just wandered around this dark, empty basement. And it took me over half an hour to come up with the idea. It just suddenly hit me, wait a minute. JonBenet has to be in that book. So this is the kind of thing I mean, when people say inject, it's I didn't drive to that whole place in the first place to do anything about that. And then when I'm there, it doesn't even hit me. I was also a little bit tipsy. Well, pretty drunk. And that security guard bought me some coffee, come to think of it. So it showed. And but when it hits me, wait a minute, she's got to be in there. And so I rushed back to the morgue, take that magazine out, open the door, and I right there at the podium, I go, and, straight to Christmas, because it has to be here. And of course it's there. And I tried to take, it's two facing pages in a very large, scrapbook type, large book. So she starts over on the one end and continues all the way to the other page right over. There's line after line after line of all the dead bodies. And she's in there. And, I read it. There's nothing critical in there. I just, the only thing interesting to me was, disposition. And that's the last thing where it says Christ Mortuary. And I'd been there before too. As in, I did not know which mortuary she went to, so that's how I found out that. But that means nothing to anybody. It means something to you when you're in the business. I've been there. But it's not like I had any kind of autopsy materials or anything like that. Although I'm always convinced that her brain was in that room because there was a whole bunch of jars full of brains up on the shelves. And it occurs to me, like, of course they would save her brain. You know what I mean? For some kind of future thing, tests or something. But I don't know, though. So anyway, I tried to take photos. And remember, I was using cardboard cams at that period because nobody had I mean, I couldn't drag photography equipment around, especially the equipment of the day. It's just too big and obvious. And so there's no way I can get a good picture of, where it says JonBenet Ramsey and then age and this and all that dull information from the 2 pages. I can't get that. So then I thought, well, and also, by the way, there's no door between me and the guy doing the eye surgery. He has his back to me, though, while he's working, like a dentist over the head of that guy. And I did take a picture, and it flashed, and I look over. He doesn't make any reaction. But the point is, it's like, I can't take pictures of this. It's not going to work. So immediately it occurs to me, yeah. And I just started ripping both of the pages out very carefully. And I took them. And now remember, we're talking about injecting, as in it didn't occur to me to do that for half an hour. And then, even then, I would have just taken pictures of it if she was just on one spot where I could make a picture happen. And so then I took them. So a series of bad degrees. So that's where I injected myself by doing that. But it wasn't like anybody would have known, except for, of course, I told my gay bodybuilder roommate about, he was also in the mortuary business, and he saw fit. He was all excited, like, no way, man, and all that. But he saw fit to call a newspaper and tell them about it. He totally snitched me off. He didn't call the cops, but it was tantamount to calling the cops because naturally, the Rocky Mountain News, which doesn't exist anymore, naturally they called the cops, and they're like, what? We don't know anything about that. So they go to the morgue, and they go, and it's like, sure enough, the pages are gone. So I get busted for that. And so you know what I mean? Like, that's my whole thing about injecting is, yes, I did that. Yes, I stole it. Yes, it's a crime. But it wasn't like I ran out with those papers, got naked in the street, and went, yeehaw, I got Ramsey papers, So he injected me into the case. That's my view.
So what was the intended goal or outcome when it came to the pages that were stolen? Like, what were you wanting to do with them? Were you wanting to sell them or just keep them as like a memento from the case?
Yeah, and you'd probably buy them. God damn you. No, somebody, well, of course, dude, they're still out there. I know where they are. But, and they're worth a fortune at this point.
So your name came up in another infamous incident involving the JonBenet Ramsey case. This time it would result in a criminal conviction. Can you tell me about that?
I'm sorry, I was looking at something outside. The arson?
Yes.
I deny that completely. This never happened. I wish. Okay, so now pile everything we just said, but first I get exploded with the getting caught with those corpse photos. This, of course, that went national. There used to be a guy for older people named Paul Harvey who had a widely syndicated little bit on the radio, like every day, 5 minutes, and he'd go, and that's the rest of the story, or something like that. It ended up on that. I became like a national joke in a sense. I was on TV, shit like that. And like the Museum of Death somehow got. Oh, I bought like one of those numbers. You can just dial the number, and then you can go to a payphone and listen to your messages. I'm doing interviews left. I'm miserable as fuck on Colfax Avenue, and yet I'm still doing interviews in San Diego for some reason. You know, all that. So the pressure of no money, no nothing, and then all of this publicity. And I won't lie, you know, I mean, I had done those art projects. I knew I got so many people mentioned in gossip columns in New York and everything. It was, so I was familiar with how to do that and everything. So it was amusing when it was portrayed amusingly. But then to have it be flung on with the Ramsey papers, the Ramsey thing being such a hot box of a mess. So now I'm totally screwed. And this is where I end up being, borrowing a couple of times, you know, for another week at the YMCA from my brother, and just living miserable. No phone, no nothing, no nothing. And I come down to the last $10, and I'm like sitting on a walking mall in Denver, the 16th Street Mall. And that's where it occurred to me. You know, I'm totally drained. I've been depressed since I was like 14. I was diagnosed with manic depression. Anyway, at the same time that Hinckley was acquitted, is the same time I was in a mental hospital being diagnosed with that. Okay, so the point is, I got all of those charges everywhere. None of which I personally, like, exactly. I did the things, but I didn't exactly inject myself into making it blow up this big. Remember, the cop agreed. So here I am, the last $10. And it occurs to me, I think I read in the paper right there, like I took out of a trash can, that the final walkthrough with the detectives and the Ramseys and their lawyers, the walkthrough of the house, like the detectives wouldn't be able to come anymore. Like the Ramseys agreed one more time, and that's it. That was going to happen this coming weekend at the time. And that's when it went off like a light bulb. Fuck it. You know, look at all this shit I'm going through, and now it's Ramsey related, and it's not really my, you know, it's, you know what I mean, the blurry line. It's my fault because I stole them. But nobody would know that if my roommate didn't stitch me off. So, anyway, I went and did that to make sure that my time would be controlled by Boulder, the whitest, easiest college jail in the country that I know of. And, you know, it's a terrible, depressed, desperate thing when you come down to that, but how was I to come from having $10 to getting myself to, you know, 8 different court cases all over, you know, county after county, and I just couldn't see a good way out. I'm like, I'm going to end up doing time anyway, and so I did that to make it so that I didn't do it in the much, much real world jails like the Arapahoe County Jail or the Denver County Jail. So that's what I did. And to this day, I still think, I know I was very sick and kind of psychotic. I was just talking to my nurse. I have a nurse that visits on Thursday. I was just telling her all this a little, you know, a couple of hours ago. And, you know, that's exactly what I was saying. It's like, obviously it was some sort of psychotic break too, but that it had all kinds of trimmings of logic. It got me out of that boiling misery of like, you're in all this trouble and you have nothing, you know, no food or anything. Like, it fixed that. I ended up in a very nice little jail, and you know, in a sense, I had some good times there. There was always, it's still jail, and there's always somebody you hate, and you know, you wish they would die, and there's people you have fights with, and you go to the hole, and stress and pressure and shit like that. But all in all, it saved me. And like the very first, when I get to the jail for the fire, I'm put in the S-man, special management, naturally, and I'm in like the pod only has like I would say about 16 cells. 2 of them are under a canopy of their own for deeply, people that just sit there, drooling and they don't even know where they are. I saw a guy in there with a sheet over. Oh yeah, they're like in their underwear too. They can't have anything. There was a guy in there with a sheet over his head going, if I could just have a pencil and paper to get my thoughts together. I mean, it's that kind of, stuff you see in jail. Like, wow, some really, really whacked out people that really need help and shouldn't be here, But anyway, so I was next to that in a canopy area. Canopy, by that I mean, cinder blocks and then windows and then strong roof over it. As in, it's extras. Being in the whole pod is segregation, but being in the extra thing is more segregation, except for it must have had to do with when they would have certain people or something, because the door to get out into the main pod I never saw it locked. Like, I never saw us 5 in there get locked in there. So, but the whole long point of that is that when that happened, when I got there, it was like an endorphin, certainly mental illness, where I would sit on the bench in there, and for several days, I would see news reports with my face on it, my mug shot, and pictures of the Ramsey house, a video of it, and I wouldn't walk the 5 feet over. This is another thing where people always confuse it with I was doing this to make publicity, but I wouldn't walk 5 feet over to go out into the room to be able to hear it. Not once did I do that. And, it's pretty rare when you're on TV for starting a famous murder house on fire and a bunch of corpse shit. So, would I like to see them now? See those news reports now? Yes, I'd love to. But that was before everything was saved on the internet,
Do you have any of the photographs or projects you did while you were working with corpses?
Yes, I still do have some. I've sold some too, so I have less and less. But I have some Xeroxes and things like that. I have the Xerox of one of these. There's one incident of taking the dead people photos in Denver. I didn't even put a sign on her or anything, but it was that gay roommate I had that I went by there. I guess I didn't live with him at the time, but anyway, I went past his house and stopped for a minute, and I go in, and his whole family was there, mother, brothers and sisters or something, and they're having a little birthday party for him. So, and then luckily, thank God, because it was uncomfortable to me, like I don't belong here, But the mother was all nice and gave me one of those party blower things. And then thank God my pager went off and I had to leave immediately and go on a call. So therefore, like somebody's mother hands you like one of those blower things. Yeehaw, it's a birthday over here. You don't just like go, I don't want that, and, throw it on the floor. I'm not like a social savage, as in, you hold on to it. I don't want it. And it ends up in my suit coat pocket. So then when I take that corpse that I went to go get, or else another one later that night because it was dark, I have that, and I tried sticking it in this corpse is a mouse, a woman corpse, an old lady, like 90, and it goes, bloop, it like spit right back out, and I put it back in, and it did it again, and then I realized like, her jaw is wired shut because that's how. Sometimes morticians super glue the lips. Sometimes they do this thing. I've done it before, where you take this gun and shoot the palate, and then you shoot down below the tongue, and the things that you shoot in have like a, the thing that you take off a bread wrapper, the twist ties. So, but there's like gold colored metally thing. So then you squeeze those together, stuff them in there, and then you put super glue on. So the point is, she'd been through that, so it's not going to wedge in. But then finally, I did get it in, and that became one of the staples of how weird and cuckoo I was. That I'd bring party blowers and all that. But see, also it's incidental. It's not like I stopped anywhere and thought like that's a good idea. I just happened to have it. I do have like Xeroxes of that. They're bad. They're not great. But you can see the woman and you can see the party blower, because those are what I have left is from Discovery. So obviously my real photos were seized.
So how are you spending your time these days after being retired from the sex trade and the mortuary business?
Mostly, for a good chunk, I was working with dogs. Probably, in a sense, the best job I ever had. But it was at PetSmart, so it was miserable. Kind of in a McDonald's sense of just ramming. I would come in and look at the computer, and my schedule would just be like out of fucking control. Like, you can't do like 17, 19 dogs. It's like, you're not going to do a good job, that's for sure. But the greed of trying to make more and more. So it was miserable that way. And also when you work with a whole bunch of girls, it was fun. Like everyone liked me. Most of them liked me and everything. But my God, you know how you're glassed in at the salon at PetSmart. One of them would be leaving and go, bye, everybody. And she would have to go around an aisle and go up to clock out. And you could still see her ass before it goes around the thing. And all those girls would start going like, did you see what she did or wore or what she said to her husband or that kind of thing? So there was a lot of drama and misery and overwork. And but I loved the dogs. I absolutely loved it. I wish you could rent a dog. I swear to God, why is there not a business like that? Like, I can't own one in this house, this tiny apartment that I live in. Why can't you go get one for $5? And, like from a shelter, you walk it, you feed it, and it's good for him and it's good for you. But I digress. So what's the question? Oh, what did I do? So, all those years after that, first I moved to, I was a bartender and I obtained, shall we say, through magic, a good pile of money, over $50,000. And I started looking online, and this is where I finally got a computer in my life. And I found an arc from like Albany, New York, down to Reading, Pennsylvania, and onwards, every town along there, where I couldn't believe my eyes. Like, you could buy houses for $10,000, $14,000 and stuff like that. So I picked Bingham to New York to go on a trip and look, because I in some stupid idea in my mind, it was like I'm moving closer back to New York City, which was the best period of my life when I lived there for 5 years. But it's 200 miles away, so if you don't live in New York is not the same. I could go to New York right now and I know where to go and how to go, but it's not the same when it's so much better. You have to be able to just go home and get out of New York when you live there. And to just be in a expensive hotel room, not worth it. But damn it, did I get lost again? I am getting really older. What did I do? I am getting very older and sicker. I have COPD and emphysema and shit like that, and and memory problems. But the point was, what did I do? When I bought that house, naturally, because everything that happens to me goes ridiculously haywire. There was a manhole at the end of my yard. My yard was huge, like 188 feet, and very slopey. And down at the bottom, I saw it when I was looking at it with the realtor, and I just never paid attention to it. And I did buy that house, and then like 2 years later, I would say, a giant, massive flood happened. That happened to me 3 times when I lived in Binghamton, and I've never been around a flood before until then. I mean, like massive floods where eventually, when you can get out and start driving again, the frontage roads are lakes. You know, roads that you're familiar with. Like you're on the highway and you know how deep it goes down there to the road, and the water's all the way up to here. And there's people's coats and underwear floating on it. It's like, man, that was a massive flood. But I lived at the top of my slope, and nothing particular happened to me except for the manhole burst open and flooded all my neighbors' yards. And of course, when the water recedes, I go out there, the next morning, and I go, holy shit! And it like echoed out of the hole, because I had no idea I had like a Phantom of the Opera freaking tunnel under my yard. So I started playing with that like crazy, because it only usually had like a dribble of water in it, or maybe it could be a foot, could be up to your ankles generally. And I would go up and down the neighborhood. I could pop out at cemeteries. It touched on or went under 4 cemeteries. I mean, like, that could only happen to fucking me. It was great. So it was great. And then that made me learn, because the very first night that happened, that made me learn about urban exploration, because part of the whole movement of exploring all those abandoned places, a wing of that is people that go into sewers and tunnels and stuff. So I'm looking for that immediately when I find out that all my neighbors are flooded and it came out of my yard. I'm like trying to see, do I have any liability over this? And that's what made me find urban exploration forums. And then I got on there, and then I started going, meeting up. I would go to Boston, Philly, Toronto, other places too, and all over Binghamton, going into these old factories. And I really loved that period. There's nothing like the peace of being in it. The only thing alive, well, there'd always be a rat or something, but in a giant empty factory. Like, and I knew nobody in it, so like on Christmas once, I actually like kind of dressed up and went into that factory and brought my old military duffel bag and stuffed this payphone that had been beaten to shit for the coin box, but it was still in good shape. It just had a big dent in it, and it was laying on the floor every time I went. I was like, I'm going to give myself that for Christmas. And I put it in my backyard. I wanted to put it up on a post and everything, but I never did. And it got filled with ants anyway. But so going further back, there's that. I got into the urban exploration thing. Now I've gotten older, it's harder. A friend of mine named The Marshallist on YouTube, he and I went down the big giant sewer a few months ago in Denver. But I fell down, got really wounded, and I just don't have the balance and stuff I used to have. And Denver has no abandoned buildings because we like to put up condos and make everyone homeless with the outrageous prices. So I would be doing that. But then right up to today, the latest thing is I've been in these predator catching communities online where, they set up stings. They get some guy to, going like, I want to lick your, and all these sex things. And they think they're talking to like a 13-year-old, and sometimes way less. So people would go out and get them and berate them and get them arrested. Thank God. Because I know what it's like to torture chomos in jail. I was really good at it. It's psychological torture. I never fought with one, but I would make it really unpleasant for some of them. But so I became a part of that community in a weird way, with all my background, and people found it, and, people wanted to ban me from it, and then I kind of overcame that to a sense, but there's always like pick people hiding behind their little hoods that want to hack at you. But eventually, it got to the point where just last week I went on 2 catches myself. I shouldn't say did them because it was the work of other people, decoying and making it happen. So I more or less I rode along, as in I drove there, but I was just kind of periphery. Although I did call the cops on one, and that's part of the job of, it's a necessary thing that needs to be done. And in fact, one of those was done at the Century 16 Theater in Aurora, otherwise known as the Batman Shooting Theater. And that the Bread picked that. It's not like we thought, like, oh, let's make him go there so we have a good background for the video. Those videos are, one is on a channel called Constantine VII, by the way, on YouTube. We didn't get, and then I went with another guy the day before for a different one, and the guy was a ghastly looking pedo for sure. But we didn't immediately get either one of them arrested, but that happens a lot. But 4 cop cars came for the first one. But they can, the detectives look at it later and then can decide to bust, and that happens all the time. We could find out any day now either one of these guys got busted. So there may be future catches in that way. But so, just happens to be that immediately, right now, to answer that question, is that's what they've been doing lately. I'm freaking exhausted from last week still.
So, before we get out of here, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Not really. I mean, like the whole thing about the ped catching thing, like, I've been showing people in that community that your videos about like the guy from Alaska and that beat and everyone finds it hysterical about that the guys just used the sex registry and went from house to house beating and taking everything, and everybody's like, fine, We looked at them like they're not human anymore, so I'm taking your TV too. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. It's like I got into that community by watching a local one called Colorado Ped Patrol, and I was all like, "Oh crap!" There's like, I got on disability, and I thought to myself like, "Please, try and do something wise, like, walk around." I lived in an enormous building at the time, like walk around the building and try and get yourself a little healthier and stuff like that. But instead, I instantly YouTube Rex bring me a ped catcher that's local, so I watched that. But that turned into he's been exposed. His name's Tommy Fellows of Colorado Ped Patrol. He's been exposed on Fox 31 Denver for being a charity fraud and all that. So that brought me into there to work on him, troll him. Everyone does, because and yet he's making hundreds of thousands. He's made a couple of 100,000 in 2 years. So I mean, I just hate. It's weird because now it's like I'm doing like. I do it in a weird, bizarre way. Like I've made videos with like I smeared peanut butter on my face and talk about shit, but because I don't care, I don't feel embarrassment anymore. But I do that and like attack him and everything. It's a sport. Like I don't know. There's thousands of us that do it, waiting for his end. But all I'm saying is weirdly that it also means that I'm like working against a criminal. I'm being like. He makes his children film. He invites pedophiles up to the house and makes his children film while work the catch, and they're like 11, 12 or 13, shit like that. So I work against that as a big hobby, and then now I ended up starting to go on these catches, and there may be more. And frankly, I do it in a weird way, but in a sense, I'm actually doing like a good thing, I mean, it's good to get these pedophiles, at least scare them to death, as in, like, where they go like, I knew it, that it would be a sting. And it's like, yeah, but you agreed to all this and you sent, certain photos and all of that. It's good to watch people get this done. And there's some very, very good people doing it. But, just related to that, I wanted to say, like, where I said that I tortured chomos in jail, it was things like, picture, how, like, the Pentagon has that park in the middle? Like, the jail would have that, and there's, like, a walking track close to the little slashes that people had in cells were on the inner core, looking out at that. And I made it so that everybody knew, every outside, like, gym period where it was warm enough to go outside, everybody knew, and not everybody did it because other people would be playing games or lifting weights or something, but all the track people knew, and that even if I'm not in their pod, we got the word around. So, like, there'd be a chomo in this certain cell, and everybody would come up and go, just knock on the window. And I don't know if you know it, but can you picture how much that would drive you mad? Because it's just a tiny little knock, but you get no rest, no comfort, no peace when you're in there and hearing that knock for hours and hours on end. Like, every new group that comes out keeps it up. We made this one man age like 20 years by doing that. Oh, and one other complete random thing, and this shows you how sick I am because I'm kind of proud of it. But it's just one of those things. This is miscellaneous to all this, but it happened in the Boulder jail. There was this kid named Josh, and he was in that 2-man pod or separation area that I said, living in his underwear and battling, but he wasn't. He could get better. He did get better and got out of there and was in my area. And he was crazy. And then it turned out to be deteriorating to a point which now makes the story shameful. But I didn't see that yet, Anyway, I told him to shit in his hand and throw it in this hippie upstairs into his cell that we didn't like. Nobody liked. And he did. And it was just before lockdown, and the hippie was asleep. So he threw that shit in there. I saw him, he came out of Josh came out of his cell with his hands behind his back, but he had to make sure that I saw it. We went up the stairs, and he did it. But then it was like an hour or two later. We're all locked down. You almost even forget about it. And then you hear, ah, ah! The hippie, he got up and found it. And that's the kind of thing where it's like inmate cruelty and manipulation, as in I'm the one that manipulated that. And I got to tell you, there is nothing. It's bad and shameful and evil and whatever, but there is a pleasure to it. There's a certain pleasure to it. Oh, but to finish that is, I don't believe I have a clipping of it anymore. But I read, once Josh was far removed from me and totally deteriorating, where they would drag him up and down the aisles with, I would see him through a window, a glimpse, always like, hospital, like a gown. Like, he ended up living that way forever and crying, and like, he was severely mentally ill by that. I mean, he deteriorated in that time. So if I'd have known that he was that bad off, I just thought he, generic nut. But if I'd have known that he was going to turn that pathetic, I wouldn't have done it. But I read an article at some point there while I was in jail that they got a law through called Josh's Law. And this is the part where I'm sickly proud of, because it had to do with, apparently there hadn't been a good, useful law about inmates throwing bodily fluids at corrections officers. So they invented it or fixed it, and they called it Josh's Law. And, come on, I can't help but snicker when I see something like that. Like, that's my law. I made that happen. And fuck that hippie too, by the way.
That was my interview with JT Colfax. For extra content and ad-free episodes, head on over to patreon.com/unforbiddentruth. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.
Unforbidden truth.